My name is Megan Mott.
And I'm Brian Wojciechowski.
We are members of the Sterling Heights Historical Commission, and today we are going to take you on a bus tour of the city.
In just a few minutes, we're going to board the bus and make 6 stops where we explain some facts and trivia about the past that you may have never known.
But first, why don't we start right here at this beautiful house, the City Museum, the Upton House. The Upton House was built in 1867 right here on this spot. This is its original location. It has never been moved.
The house was the focal point of the 136-acre Upton farm that extended all the way from the Clinton River across the road south to Stevenson High School. The house is listed on the National Register of Historic Homes and is one of the oldest in Macomb County.
The house was built by William and Sarah Upton, prominent and well-respected residents in the area. The Upton House was considered quite modern for its day. It boasted the latest amenities and was one of the first local homes to have running water, powered by a windmill on the property. An elaborate birdhouse out front was an area landmark.
The house has 2 stories and a stone basement. Originally, there were also several outbuildings for the farm around the back. Dodge Park Road was much lower then than it is today, so the home seemed perched on a small hill.
The home's elegant design is in the Victorian Italianate style, which was popular among the prosperous of the day. The brick was originally a natural red color, but it's been painted several times. The house was used for both residential and commercial purposes, and inside it was remodeled many times to suit the needs of various owners.
This bay window was purposely placed to overlook an apple orchard located at what is now Dodge Park.
Victorian Italianate elements are recognizable. The cube shape, spindle trim around the windows and porch, a low-pitched roof with wide eaves and large brackets, and a cupola at the top. The windows are tall, thin, arched, and with pediments.
The cupola is one of the stunning features of the home. Cupolas were often added to bring light and air into a structure, but they also served as lookout towers. The sight from this one lends a panoramic 360-degree view. Indoors, the cupola is still accessible via a narrow chain ladder.
Over its 154 years, the home changed hands about 20 times and was even used as office space. The city obtained the property in the 1980s. And now it's also the City Museum. The upper level has community artifacts and information on city history. The lower level is restored to look as it might have when the Uptons lived here. This statue, commissioned in 2001, is called Sarah's Heirloom, and it's a tribute to the Upton family. It depicts 2 Sarah Uptons. Grandmother Sarah Aldrich Upton teaching her granddaughter Sarah Jean Upton how to do needlepoint. The statue is made of bronze and weighs 400 pounds. The artist is Janice B. Trimp, who is renowned for her work both locally and nationally.
We won't go inside today, but tours are available for small groups by appointment. Check the city's website to register. Now, if you'll follow me, we'll get started on our tour.
As we travel to our stops, we'll recap some local history. Each stop covers a different topic and time period. We're going to start in the northwest section of the city. Today, we think of Sterling Heights as merely a modern suburb, but there's much more to this city's story. In the early 19th century, this territory became federal land and went up for sale. Families flocked here from all over the world. The only condition to purchase was that the land had to be occupied and worked as a farm. But that's far from where development led.
Sterling Township was platted for 36 square miles with straight-cut borders at DeQuinder, 14 Mile, Hayes, and Hall Roads. One small exception sits at Hall Road in Van Dyke, where an irregular Utica boundary dips a few blocks south. This deviation goes back many years to the preservation of the downtown village of Utica. As a city, historically, its population growth from township to city is fascinating. In 1880, the population was approximately 2,000 residents. In 1960, 80 years later, it was only 6,500. In 1980, only 20 years after that, it ballooned to nearly 109,000. So why, in just 20 years, did more than 100,000 people move to this area? The answer is manufacturing. In 1956, Ford Motor Company built a 3 million square foot manufacturing facility at Mound and 17 Mile. Within months, one of Ford's suppliers, TRW, followed nearby. Soon, many manufacturers were scooping up land, leaving their aged facilities in Detroit behind. All those jobs meant thousands of commuting workers wanted housing nearby. The new manufacturing created an enormous housing market in the area, but manufacturing wasn't new to Sterling Township. It can be traced back almost 200 years. That's part of the story of our first stop, which is actually a school.
We are at Burr Elementary School on Ryan Road near 18 Mile. The school is named after Lewis Burr, who was a businessman and a manufacturing pioneer in Sterling Township over 175 years ago.
Mr. Burr owned a home at the corner of 18 Mile and Ryan, and across the road he ran a successful brick and tile factory. Burr also had 8 sons, and he wanted them to get an education. So, in 1845, he offered to make and donate bricks for a schoolhouse, and he and other nearby farmers organized School District Number 4. Burr's school went through many additions, extensions, and rebuilds, but the name always stayed the same. Inside the building today, portraits of Lewis and Eliza Burr are still on the wall.
In 1956, Burr School became part of Utica Community Schools, and a new building replaced the old brick schoolhouse. 2 major upgrades followed, making it what we see today. This model of the schoolhouse was made from original Burr bricks that were from the Burr home. And this engraved stone was on the front door carriage stop. Let's take a look around back.
All schoolhouses had one room. Oral histories of Burr describe a large stove in the back with a circular barrier around it to protect the children from burns. Students were of all grade levels. All districts held class from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily, giving students time to help with the crops or milking the cows before coming to school. The school year didn't start until after the harvest, around November 1st. There was a spring break used for planting, then a summer session that didn't end until late in the season.
Teachers were hired, 1 per schoolhouse, and they had many responsibilities. This photo is of a local resident, teacher Meta Ahrens, at Fox School on Clinton River Road. Ethel Cope Bobson taught in this district, and her salary for the whole year was considered high at $145. When she arrived at Burr School, she wrote that there were no books, so all work had to be done on the chalkboard.
Behind the schoolhouse, there was a woodshed and 2 outhouses, one for girls and one for boys. Today, the school grounds include an outdoor classroom and a patch of land for a learning garden.
Many restrictions were also placed on school teachers. An example can be seen in this 19th century contract. Rules for teachers. You will not marry during your term of contract. You are not to keep company with men. You must be home between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless attending a school function. You may not loiter downtown in ice cream stores. You may not travel beyond the city limits unless you have permission of the chairman of the board. You may not ride in a carriage or automobile with any man unless he is your father or brother. You may not smoke cigarettes. You may not dress in bright colors. You may under no circumstances dye your hair. You must wear at least 2 petticoats. Your dresses must not be any shorter than 2 inches above the ankle. To keep the schoolhouse neat and clean, you must sweep the floor at least once daily, scrub the floor at least once a week with hot, soapy water, clean the blackboards at least once a day, and start the fire at 7 a.m. so the room will be warm when pupils arrive.
So here at Burr School, we have two documented histories. One of an early 19th century schoolhouse and another of early manufacturing in the area. Both are great examples of how each other helped develop the Sterling Township community. Now let's move on to our next stop.
We are going to head northeast now to that Sterling-Utica border that was mentioned earlier. And the time period is going to shift to the early 1900s. At that time, downtown Utica was in full bloom and it was the place to be. For years, area farm families came to town in the village of Utica for business, shopping, socializing, and especially Saturday nights. By 1920, Van Dyke Road also became a main line for city folks driving north on weekends in their new automobiles looking for a country experience.
The area became a popular destination. Sterling Township started adding roadside stands, eateries, and recreation spots too. Farmers got in on the action by converting portions of their farmland into various new business opportunities. Our next stop tells such a story. It's a site of a 1930s farm turned entertainment venue that morphed over the decades until the 1990s. It's a site of Utica Amusement Park located in Sterling Township. This is the former site of Utica Amusement Park, formerly known as Riverland Amusement Park. It was named for the close by Utica border. Maps as late as 1925 show this plot of land as a farm, but soon afterward, part of it was parceled out for use as a park. In the years that followed, the site grew to a full entertainment venue.
In 1936, Stanton Welch bought 14 acres of what he called fine-looking land for a park that had the added bonus of facing busy Van Dyke Road. Welch built a food stand and dance pavilion, and until World War II, operated what turned out to be a floundering business. In 1943, he sold the park to Myron Brown. Brown came to this area from New York during the war as a job transfer at the Tank Command in Warren. With his wife and children still back east, Brown wanted some country land to build a family home and a barn for some horses. By the time Brown bought Welch's park, it was in disrepair.
Welch had tenants living in trailers along the river. Brown cleared the property, first phasing out the trailer rentals. He built a brick house on the north end of the park, and then he and his son Ron built a barn with 16 stalls for horses. Brown restored the picnic area and dance pavilion and opened it for square dancing. By 1946, the war was over, and families were making Sunday drives to the country again. As Brown improved the grounds, drivers on Van Dyke were attracted to its scenic beauty and grazing horses.
Brown's big break came on the 4th of July, 1952, when the Warren Fire Department rented the park for their field day. They also hired Tony Carl to bring his kiddie carnival rides to the event. An agreement allowed Brown to receive 10% of the ride's proceeds and additionally to charge his own price for pony rides on his horses. Brown's take for the day was $1,000, and he soon decided he was going to start a new business. Brown purchased the rides from Tony Carl and installed a sign that said, Utica Amusement Park. Over the next few years, Brown phased out the horses and added more rides. There was a carousel, kiddie boat ride, chair-o-plane swing ride, tilt-a-whirl, C.W. Parker Ferris wheel, kiddie roller coaster, and vendor carts with candy apples, cotton candy, and midway games. It became a very popular spot.
In 1965, Brown sold the park to his son Ron. Ron Brown operated the park for another 24 years. He specialized in booking private events to groups such as churches, unions, and company functions. In slow seasons, he added occasional open Saturdays for the general public. In 1989, Nelson Joseph and Jerry Simony bought the park and changed the name to Riverland Amusement. Only 3 years later, they sold it to Rick and Amico Roll. By that time, the park had taken on an entirely different atmosphere with DJ nights, a weekend flea market, and miniature golf tournaments. One of the weaknesses of the property was its low elevation next to the Clinton River. The park would often flood, forcing closures and making regular income unpredictable.
As the area built up, the property became more valuable than the park's receipts, and it closed. The rides were auctioned off, the land sold, and the park slipped into obscurity. Plans for redevelopment have been discussed for years, but they continue to be proposed and changed. Now, if you'll join us on the bus, we'll continue on to our next stop.
We're going farther east now, to the site of something that was once considered a great 19th century innovation and a ridiculed folly. Along the way, we'll be trailing the main waterway of Sterling Heights, and a partner to this story, the Clinton River. The Clinton River rises from wetlands in Springfield Township in Oakland County. A series of dams creates a number of small lakes which are pumped under downtown Pontiac and then spill eastward, emerging as the Clinton River. From earliest times, people have gravitated toward the meandering beauty of the Clinton River, originally called the Huron River by French and British explorers.
By 1838, government maps of the territories were being charted, and it was discovered that several Michigan rivers were named Huron. Duplicate names were forbidden, so the Macomb County Huron River was renamed the Clinton River in honor of DeWitt Clinton, governor of New York State. Clinton was popular because his successful Erie Canal was credited with the early settlement of Michigan. The Erie Canal, known for faster, cheaper, and safer transport, allured many New Yorkers to pull up stakes for new land in Michigan. Additionally, bands of immigrants arriving at Ellis Island chose to pass straight through New York on the Erie Canal to the westward prize of land ownership. It was the success of the Erie Canal that created the plan to develop another canal, a shortcut into the interior of Michigan. That's the project we're about to discuss, the Clinton-Kalamazoo Canal. The idea was to open a canal on the banks of the Clinton River in Mount Clemens and create a passageway across Michigan.
We're currently located at Canal and Shaner Roads. It seems like nothing more than an average shopping center intersection, but some interesting history actually took place right under the ground at this very spot. This is the area where the Clinton-Kalamazoo Canal ran, and a new commemorative sign has been placed here to mark the site.
The canal was meant to be a super infrastructure project that would grow the state's commerce and population. It started at the mouth of the Clinton River in Mount Clemens and went through Clinton Township before passing through Sterling Heights right near here. Construction ran northwest through Sterling Township to Utica and was charted to move onward across the state.
So, try to picture this land when the canal was started in 1837. It was bucolic woods and open fields, very few houses, simple dirt roads, and just occasional horse traffic. Yet, even then, the desire to develop and modernize altered the countryside environment, cutting a swath through the township. Impressed by the success of the Erie Canal, Governor Stevens Mason pushed funding for the new canal. Planners believed a canal would expedite cargo and passengers across the state, eliminating the need to go up and around the Straits of Mackinac.
The canal was platted to run 216 miles across lower Michigan, connecting with the Kalamazoo River, which flowed out to Lake Michigan. Promoters were convinced that the Clinton River Valley was an ideal route, and that it would not only drastically cut transportation time, but also render limitless benefits to the adjacent countryside. The idea met with eager approval, but the planning was poor and the engineering was faulty. Problems arose almost immediately. A private company was incorporated to remove obstructions on the path from Mount Clemens to Oakland County, a mere distance of about 30 miles. When construction started, shanty towns quickly sprang up around the digging sites, leading to problems of rowdiness and drinking.
The canal was designed to be narrow and too shallow at only about 4 feet deep and 40 feet wide. Dense forests, swamps, and a 200-foot change in elevation required construction of 25 locks from Mount Clemens to Pontiac. The dams and locks were constructed of stones and logs that shifted. Progress was slow and challenging for men who labored with nothing more than picks and axes. Canal engineering called for the excavated ground from the canal to be built up on both sides, creating a towpath for the horses needed to haul the barges. The sides of the canal were set with large timber log walls that began to fail soon after they were installed. The banks began caving in, and burrowing animals displaced many timbers.
A wood aqueduct carrying the canal over the Clinton River near Yates Mill started leaking shortly after completion. While the woes of construction became all-consuming, numerous other problems cropped up. Disputes arose over canal incorporation, property rights, toll charges, and boundary lines. None of this, however, weighed as heavily as financial worries from the Panic of 1837, which began at the start of the project and only continued to get worse.
In 1843, 5 years after the start of construction, work had progressed only 16 miles, as far as Rochester. There, it all stopped. Money for the project dried up. The contracting company went bankrupt and had no funds to pay the workers. Before leaving the project, many angry laborers destroyed portions of the canal and pilfered anything they could carry off. The last doom of the canal came after the 6-year depression ended. The rapidly expanding railroad system had advanced and surpassed the need of it. The canal became outmoded before it was finished. Declared a failure, it was abandoned.
Portions of the canal were used to power 2 water mills. One small section remained usable. For about 2 years, a barge ferried goods between Mount Clemens and Utica. A widened portion in Utica was used as a turning basin for return trips to Mount Clemens. It's reported that only about $96 was ever collected in tolls. The turning basin soon became a favorite recreation spot for locals. It was called the Mill Pond, and in winter it was a very popular ice skating spot.
Gradually, the canal fell into disrepair and mostly disappeared. Modern-day subdivision development brought up chunks of the canal during construction as sewer and water lines were laid. In Sterling Heights, there's no longer any recognizable evidence of the canal, although pieces of wood pop up from time to time along Canal Road. There are sections of the canal available to see near Yates Cider Mill in Rochester. Let's go on to our next stop.
We'll be heading south now, towards one of the more historic sections of Sterling Heights. We'll be visiting a hidden treasure, Edgerton Cemetery, the oldest cemetery in the city. Early pioneers to this area were eagerly snatching up land at $1.25 an acre. 2 kinds of people came, those who knew farming and those who didn't. Numerous land buyers were resettling after farming failures in New York State's rocky soil. At the same time, emigrating Europeans were coming directly to Michigan with a great desire to own property, something that's hard to do in Europe. Some were wealthy and others were not. All were seeking a better life.
Farm life was hard, but it offered the possibility of prosperity. Settlers experienced difficulties and successes, and that can almost be seen here at Edgerton Cemetery.
Edgerton is a final resting place that almost tells a story of this close-knit community of early settlers. Many of them may have seemed well off, but they often died young. Follow us. Edgerton Cemetery is a bit tricky to locate. It's nestled behind this apartment complex and up on a small hill, but it's right here on Shaner Road north of Metro Parkway. Edgerton was established in 1839, and most graves belong to the farm pioneers who lived nearby. 170 people are known to be buried here. Reading the grave markers reveals a lot about their lives. The cemetery was founded by the Edgerton family on this land, which was their farm. Eleazar Edgerton was a local justice of the peace. He and wife Nancy lived into their 80s, but only 2 of their 9 children outlived them. 7 died before reaching their 20s. 8 Edgertons are buried here.
Records indicate that 3 Civil War veterans are buried here: Charles Scribner and 2 Drake brothers, 21-year-old Milan and 30-year-old George. They served with Company B of the 22nd Michigan Infantry. George Drake was a private and Milan was a corporal. Company B engaged in numerous fierce battles, including the Siege of Atlanta led by General Sherman, and several violent skirmishes against roving Confederate forces. Private George Drake met his fate at Chattanooga in August 1864. Corporal Milan Drake died at the end of the Civil War in April 1865. The Drakes were among the 3 officers and 86 enlisted men of Company B killed in action. Initially buried at the National Cemetery in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where their memorial markers remain, the Drake family had their sons' bodies brought to Edgerton as their final resting place.
At age 33, Charles Scribner, a father of 2 small boys, enlisted in Company F, 22nd Michigan Infantry. He never made it into battle. En route, Scribner contracted measles at the Union Army camp. He recovered enough to travel farther south, but fell ill again and died in Indianapolis in February 1864. Scribner was among the 4 officers and 306 enlisted men of the 22nd who died from disease during the Civil War. 5 Scribners are buried here. 2 were born as far back as 1796 and 1799. John Upton and his wife Elizabeth are buried here. They were the parents of William Upton, who owned the Upton House seen at the start of our tour today. John came to the United States from England, eventually migrating to this area. John died at age 51, Elizabeth at age 63. Their daughter, Sarah, also buried here, died at age 20. This Sarah Upton is the sister of William Upton, not his wife, who was also called Sarah. The earliest burial here in 1839 was not for an Edgerton, but for Nancy Curtis. She died at only age 38 and had 4 daughters, all of whom died by age 28. Nancy's husband, Cordelio, married again after her death. His second wife, Mariette Harvey, died at only age 37. Mariette had 2 daughters with Cordelio. They died at ages 5 and 10. Many of the Curtis family are buried here. Their graves are marked by this imposing obelisk monument.
There are many very old and fascinating headstones to explore here at Edgerton. Consider making a visit. Now we'll move on to our next stop, where we explore township land and how it developed over time.
Since its origin, Sterling Heights has gone through several changes of name, and it's not exactly clear where the name Sterling actually comes from. Sterling Township was originally formed in 1835 under the name Jefferson Township, after President Jefferson. Only 3 years later, maps were being charted and the name was suddenly changed to Sterling. More than 130 years later, when Sterling Township filed to become a city, another name change was required because there already was a Sterling, Michigan. City officials, wanting to preserve at least some identity, simply added the word Heights. Over time, not only did the community's name change, so did the land.
Over the nearly 200 years following Sterling Heights' organized settlement, slow but widely divergent land use evolved. World events, the economy, and even the weather compelled landowners to become innovators. The land went from open farm territory to a major modern city, but the path wasn't always straight or speedy. That's what we'll be talking about at our next stop, a neighborhood park that was part of a land evolution.
We're at Magnolia Park on Metro Parkway near Ryan Road. This neighborhood park seems pleasant and new, yet historically, it was established nearly 100 years ago, yes, as a park. Recall that this land was originally sold as farm acreage. However, in times of failure or hardship, it was only by adapting to change that family generations were able to keep it. For those who couldn't make it through the droughts, financial panics, depression, or war, there was ruin. Acreage was sold off whole or piecemeal, families disappeared, and new waves, many of immigrants, replaced them. Farming was always the land base, but it was often other new ventures that kept the property afloat. Those who evolved survived.
As many farms struggled to make it through the decades of troubles, it was a new federal law that became the mother of invention, the Prohibition Act of 1919. Legions of Americans rejected the law that banned the manufacture and sale of alcohol. As the public sought ways to continue to imbibe, the countryside provided a natural hideaway haven, and good neighbor Canada was able to provide a steady, covert supply. Farmers were in a unique position to handle such contraband. Building on the popularity of the automobile and the Sunday drive, some had converted sections of their property into country park destinations. This new form of recreation attracted hordes of weary city factory workers. A day in the country rated high on their leisure list. When Prohibition came along, these locations, far from the eye of the law, became a natural oasis for outings with alcohol, and park income soared. Soon, private parks popped up all around Macomb County. There were family parks, public parks, club parks, and ethnic parks, all charging admission and additionally selling concession foods and drinks.
Some parks were elaborate, offering swimming and fishing, bandstand music and dancing, playgrounds and eateries, all for a charge. The addition of liquor sales soon made them in-demand spots. Probably the most famous private park in Sterling Township was Belvedere Park, located near Utica Road and Hayes. It had a sand beach, casino, dance pavilion, restaurant, and a 60-foot bar. Park admission was charged by the carload or by the day for private bookings. Meanwhile, on the balance of the farm, crop production was concentrated. Near the parks, farmers opened roadside stands, which were crowded with visitors who clamored for fresh country foods to take back to the city. Remaining crops were sold bulk to markets. This new model, multi-purpose farm basked in prosperity until the 1930s.
The hardship of the Great Depression brought change. Even farm goods saw reduced demand. Alcohol was legal again for those who could afford it, but trips to the countryside were often expensive and unnecessary. Picnic days were done and the parks were vacant. Despite hard times, enterprising owners developed yet a new survival tactic: truck farming. Crops were downsized to fewer varieties with shorter harvest. Produce was piled onto trucks and driven to Eastern Market in Detroit. There, the hope was to sell most of the haul to restaurants or passersby. Sadly, many a truck came back with their load unsold. The Depression slid into World War II. Farmhands went to war, gasoline and food rationing were imposed, and farming waned. The private parks became ghost towns. A few partially rebounded after the war, but never to full grandeur. All were eventually rolled into land sales of the housing boom that created modern-day Sterling Heights. That brings us to this subdivision park, which was originally established as one of those farms turned private parks. It had a bandstand, dancing, and a concession stand that sold hot dogs, hamburgers, soda pop, and beer. Let's move on now to our next stop, which takes us very far back in time.
So we've looked at the many phases and changes of Sterling Heights, and we've come to this current time in a busy city. The beautiful woods and quiet farms have been traded for houses, stores, and traffic jams. But that modernization is the very thing that brings us to the oldest and most interesting historical discovery of the area. As the big equipment of construction stirred up the earth, some unexpected secrets were revealed. It was the discovery of ancient history right here in this area.
We're on the grounds of Heritage Junior High School at Dodge Park and Metro Parkway, and here is an important historical plaque. It marks a site of what is called Holcomb Beach. Research has documented that Holcomb Beach was an area of Paleo-Indian occupation going back at least 10,000 years. An even more awesome part of the story is that this find was discovered by two local residents in the 1960s.
Amateur archaeologist Jerry DeVischer drove past this spot every day on his way to work. Dodge Park was a dirt road at the time, and DeVischer was fascinated by the sand ridges that ran along each side of it. DeVischer knew that often Indian relics could be found in such formations. He decided to investigate, and his inkling led to big discoveries. Fellow archaeology enthusiast Ed Walla joined DeVischer in excavating the area, and they quickly uncovered numerous Indian spearheads. When their hunch was confirmed, the University of Michigan joined the dig, and archaeologists from all over the state were interested. Research found that the sand ridge was 605 feet above sea level, and that at the time ancient glaciers were receding, the ridge was actually the base of a large, long-lost lake. Meticulous searching at the dig revealed over 7,000 arrowheads and stones of different shapes believed to have been tools used for various tasks.
Over 2,600 square feet of Holcomb Beach were excavated. The material found was mostly made of chert, a microcrystallized quartz normally found only in Aranac, Huron, and Tuscola counties. Some artifacts found, however, were made from exotic cherts from outside Michigan. This was important in showing the extent to which the native culture traveled. It also indicated that the people were nomadic and probably carried their tools with them. The find included knives, scrapers, drills, and wedges used to split animal bones. Many of the tools showed signs of being reworked. A large amount of charcoal from fire was also present. Experts believed heat was used to make working the chert easier. Caribou bones were also found nearby, which meant that their fires were used to cook the meat.
Throughout the years, experts have worked to decipher this site of Holcomb Beach and the lifestyle of Paleo-Indians. Clearly, their spears with arrowheads were used to propel a deadly blow into animals. It's believed that these first people stayed at Holcomb Beach at certain seasons of the year when caribou migrated here, and that they occupied the area for a few weeks at each time after a successful kill. Think about that! Scientific evidence proves that people lived right here on this spot over 10,000 years ago, and we even know what they were doing. That's incredible history, right here in our own backyard.
It certainly makes you think about the secret history of our everyday neighborhoods. On that thought, we've come to the end of our city bus tour. We hope you've enjoyed your trip through time today and have gained a new appreciation for the rich history of Sterling Heights.
And the Historical Commission invites you to continue to learn about local history at our library and at the Upton House Museum. We hope you'll visit some of the sites on today's tour and visit the Upton House Museum on our open days. You can visit the library's website to make a tour reservation.
Until then, see you next time.